Welcome. This is Carolyn Forte with the game curriculum. Today I'm going to introduce you to the game curriculum. But before we look at actual games, it's important to understand why and how games are a good way to learn. David Elkind did decades of research into child development. He says, decades of research has shown that play is crucial to physical, intellectual, and social emotional development at all ages. This is especially true of the purest form of play, the unstructured, self-motivated, imaginative, independent mind, where children initiate their own games and even invent their own rules. Another researcher, Jane Healy, in Endangered Minds, explains how many attention problems could be related to the fact that so many children nowadays have their natural energies bottled up in schedules and expectation and few physical outlets. When a child plays and exercises large muscles or pursues games and hobbies that build fine motor skills, like construction models, carpentry, sewing, playing jacks, he or she is strengthening motor synapses that are next-door neighbors to the neurons that manage mental behaviors, including attention. Adults are too busy trying to sit down and force learning, rather than letting them play naturally to build the motor control centers of their brain. Dr. Healy isn't the only one who talks about the importance of play. Stuart Brown, MD, says there's a great deal of evidence that the road to mastery of any subject is guided by play. Play creates new neural connections and tests them. It creates an arena for social interaction and learning. It creates a low-risk format for finding and developing innate skills and talents. Dr. Carla Hannaford is the creator of Brain Gym. And she says in Smart Moves, learning is not all in your head. The active muscular expression of learning is an important ingredient of learning. We tend to relegate muscles to the domain of the body, not the mind. But it can be seen in the research showing that students who take drama or music, where a lot of expression is encouraged, do far better on standardized tests than students without experience of these arts. Why use play beyond those experts' opinions? Dr. Karen Purvis of Texas Christian University's Child Development Center says scientists have determined that it takes approximately 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless you do it with play, in which case it takes between 10 to 20 repetitions, with an average of 12. Now think about that as you're pulling up flashcards 400 times each. So let's recap a little what we've learned about games. Games are excellent for memory drill. You can learn much easier and faster with games. Also, the more senses used in playing a game, the better the retention. So games that use muscular motion as well as thinking skills are even better for retention. Add music, and it's even better than that. Also, emotion enhances memory. Whenever you have an event that contains a lot of emotion, either good or bad, it's something that you're much more likely to remember clearly. So adding emotion, happiness, to learning really enhances memory. This is what the science shows. Also, you can use games to stimulate interest in a variety of topics, and we'll talk more about that a little later. Games are also brain stretchers. They enhance thinking skills. And games are also traditional teaching tools. Now, Dr. Elkind talks about 4 different types of play. First, there's mastery play. That's when you just learn skills through repetition. And you've all seen the toddler who practices the new thing over and over and over. The baby who's learning to walk, who falls down and gets up, falls down and gets up, falls down and gets up. It's same going on through childhood. Children who want to learn a new skill will do what they have to do to learn it. The second is innovative play. Once a child has mastered a skill through repetitive play, he will look for ways to change it and add to it. Like climbing up the side of the playground ladder instead of going up the front. Just doing things differently. Kinship play. Children of the same age or size tend to easily interact, even if they are strangers. Kinship play is an initiation into social learning and cooperative activities. And then there's therapeutic play, which is imaginative play that children use to relieve stress or get over trauma. Another aspect that's very important in choosing games is taking into account levels of learning. So let me just go a little deeper into that. There are basically 4 levels of learning just about everything. We all go through them. The first level is introduction. And the second level is recognition, the third is recall, and the fourth is fluency. Now, some tasks go very, very quickly from introduction to fluency. For instance, learning to open a doorknob. You go very, very fast from this is a doorknob, you do this to make it open the door, to fluency, meaning I got this, I'll never forget how to do it. But other things can take much, much longer. So let me give you an example, walking through learning something new. So level 1 in this little lesson is introduction. This is a poppy. If you've never seen a poppy before, now I'm introducing you to it. So now level 2 is recognition. Find the poppy. If you can find the poppy among the 6 correctly, then you're at level 2 of learning, which is recognition. Now, level 3 is called recall. So recall is where I can say, what is this? And show you a picture, and you can recognize it and name the poppy. It's the fill-in-the-blank test in school. Level 4 is fluency. Now, whenever you see a poppy, no matter what the situation, you recognize it, you know it's a poppy, and you know what it's called. You are fluent in recognizing a poppy. Now, that's a really simple one. Something a little more difficult is, say, learning a new word. In this case, learning a foreign language. So this is a German word, Bleistift. It means pencil. So how do you connect Bleistift to pencil and remember it? This is where some memory techniques called mnemonic devices can be extremely helpful. And you can use these in play too. So a silly phrase or sentence, Mr. Bly is stiff as a pencil, or a cartoon drawing of a pencil as stiff Mr. Bly, or draw a cartoon of a pencil blasting off. Blast it, blast up, blastiff. You can see the connection. It can help you, depending on your learning style, It can help you learn what a Bleistift is very, very quickly. Or you can just repeat or write it 400 times. Your choice. Now, there's another aspect of learning that is very, very important to take into account, especially when you are choosing a game. Dr. Victor Frankl gave us this concept, this chart of gradations of difficulty in learning. So on the upper left-hand side, we have easy to learn, easy to do. Now, that could be, depending on a child's age, it could be something like playing Go Fish with cards, or bingo, or copying a little text. It's easy to learn to do that, and it's easy to do. Now, easy to learn, hard to do is a little different. Digging a ditch is really easy to learn, but it's hard to do. Playing jacks is easy to learn, but it's hard to do skillfully. So it's something that takes real work because there's real muscle control involved there. Playing Scrabble. It's easy to learn how to play Scrabble, but it's not an easy game to play. It's hard to do. Chess could be in that category too. It's fairly easy to learn the chess moves, but to be a skilled chess player is hard. It takes a lot of mental concentration and work. Now, going over to hard to learn, easy to do. An example would be riding a bike. When you're first learning to ride a bike, that's hard, but it's quite easy once you learn. Good penmanship is another thing that's hard to learn. It takes time. It takes a lot of practice. But it's very easy to do once you have learned it. Also, playing a musical instrument is an example of something that can be hard to learn. It takes time. You have to develop a lot of muscle memory, use multiple parts of the brain at the same time. But once you learn it, it's generally really easy for you to play that instrument. And then last, the hardest thing are the hard to learn, hard to do items. So I could give an example like a jet pilot landing on a carrier. Now that is definitely hard to learn and hard to do. Most of us never have to do anything that hard. But advanced mathematics is also hard to learn, hard to do. Or writing a skilled term paper, hard to learn, hard to do. There's a lot of work there. So Dr. Frankl advises that the majority of a student's time should be spent in easy to learn, easy to do. Now that sounds like you're not doing much, but gradually as you learn, you're able to move to little more difficult things, little more difficult, little more difficult. If the majority of what you're doing is hard in any way, it's going to be discouraging. So you don't want the majority of what you're doing to be hard. So that's the introduction part. Now I'm going to give you an example of a game that is an introductory math game. So in this game, children do not have to yet encounter a numeral. Numerals are very abstract representations of a number of items. So in Old MacDonald Counting Step, you are learning to recognize quantities, and you're learning matching, and you're learning counting. So this is the beginning of mathematical understanding. Now, the next level with mathematical understanding is number recognition. And so this is a game the ladybug game teaches counting and number recognition. It uses numerals, but it also has quantities that you can count. So children can connect the quantity with the numeral. All right, the next level of learning is recall. If you remember, recall is when you can recognize something, and not just recognize it, but you can name it. So this little game, Frapper Deck multiplication, it's designed with for learning multiplication, but it's very easily used to also teach even preschoolers numbers, the numerals, as well as the number of items. So you can play Go Fish with the cards. This is how I learned numbers when I was 4 years old. My mother always played a little game with, a little card game with me. The difference with this Frapper Deck multiplication game is that it has, instead of having an ace and face cards, it goes from 0 to 12. So you don't have to worry about the face cards and try to assign a numeral to them that you can remember. So this is a little game that you can use for many years in many different ways. So now we get to fluency with numerals. See, we're just talking about numbers and numerals now. Quick count is an unusual game in which you are you're competing with somebody else to count backward from 50 to 1. You're finding the numerals on the card and circling them and going backward. So this is true fluency. Fluency is when it's automatic, you really get the counting, you understand it, and you know the numbers in order, forwards and backwards. And being able to count backwards is a really useful skill in arithmetic. So now we have covered the levels of understanding that impact the games that you will need to choose for your child. Now let's look at the kinds of developmental areas that are addressed with many games. So games can develop motor and perceptual skills, including visual perception and auditory perception. So I showed here a little boy trying to balance something, a little board on a rocking stand. The game is called Chicky Boom, and it's loads of fun. And the different skills that you learn in playing this game include balance, hand-eye coordination, as you can see him working very hard to put the thing in the right place to balance, fine motor skills, planning. Now there's also number recognition in there because each item on his little balance has a large numeral, either a 1, 2, or 3 on it. So there's number recognition, counting, because you will count up your score when you're finished. And then, of course, that means addition. And there's also taking turns involved in this game. So there are lots and lots of skills in one little game that looks very simple. So games can also stimulate interest in a variety of topics. You can introduce different ideas, different areas of study to your children, and then you can watch and see what interests them most and follow that up with books or other activities. So here are some of the topics and some of the games available on the market. The science game right there, Wonders of Science, is a Professor Noggins game. There are a couple dozen different Professor Noggins games. One of the good things about these very, very popular games are that it's set up so it's a little quiz game, but there are super easy questions on each card and there are hard questions on each card. So the whole family can play, and younger children can be assigned the easy questions, which are either true, false, or multiple choice, or some other simple way of presenting it. And the teens and adults can take the hard questions, and everybody will learn a great deal. There's history. I showed medieval history game that was developed by an 8th grade teacher. So this can be used also for even preschoolers who can't read, because there are pictures on the cards, and he has a version of the game that just can be played with the pictures. And then a game for older children where they have to categorize places, the pictures, and learn parts of the history. Then I have an example of a geography game, Where in the World, which teaches world geography. The writing and storytelling game there is called Create a Story, and it's literally a writing curriculum in a box. Lots and lots of fun and lots of learning. For mathematics, I put down the Wonder Number game, which also can range from teaching preschoolers just to count and recognize numerals to all the way to algebra, because it teaches prime numbers, it teaches factoring, and other skills that are extremely important for algebra. And then there's art, and I pictured an art game here, which also has a wide range, because comes with a little book about each of the pictures, and there are a number of games that can be played with the pictures, and they can be played by preschoolers or they can be played by high school students. Everyone will learn from these games. There are also games that encourage thinking skills. They stretch your brain. And I just showed a couple of examples here. Set has been around for a long time. It was a Mensa game. It makes your brain think. But I have taught set to 6-year-olds in 5 minutes. So it's simple in concept, but there are many levels. And so you can gradually become more and more skilled. Nia is a relatively new game that is a strategy game. You have to be able to think ahead as you play Nia. And the Wonder Number game was in the last slide. It was also, it will teach many, many thinking skills, strategies. It's not just a number game. The game is played on a 100 board, but all the games, except for one, are strategy games. So kids who are afraid of math will love the strategy games. They'll see that they don't have to be stressed on figuring out the math, because they can enjoy the strategy part of the games. Now, the game curriculum lays out suggested games for all levels. And you must consider, when you're choosing a game, these 4 points. You need to consider the skill level of the child or children who are going to use the game. You have to go back to is it an introductory game? Is it a game that's just the next level up with recognition? Is it a game where you're much more skilled? Or is it a game for people who are pretty fluent in a particular skill or topic? So And remember that each new skill and level takes time for the brain to assimilate. So don't get frustrated. Get the level that your child is comfortable at, and then you can gradually increase the skill level. Next is learning style. Some children respond better to games that are physically active. Others love creative games or strategy games. Some love to have games with a lot of spatial skill, akin to puzzles, but there are games for multiple players that use these same kind of spatial skills. You also have to pay attention your child's attention span. So if a very young child may only be good for a game that's 5 minutes long, you have to work with that, because as they grow older, they'll be able to handle longer games. So pay attention to your child's attention span when you choose a game. And then the last one is pay attention to your child's interests. So children have different types of things they want in the subject of a game. They need to learn to expand that, but you'll be better off if you focus probably more toward the interest of the child or children involved. So now I'd like to give you some grade level examples so you can see how to put together a program that uses a lot of games. It doesn't mean that you won't ever sit down with a workbook, but games can do the lion's share of the teaching. Now, I have chosen the traditional kindergarten, which doesn't seem to exist anymore, but for many, many decades, kindergarten was a place of developing skills and beginning to learn the alphabet, beginning to learn numerals, getting acquainted with those things, and being mostly play and activities, and just developing hand-eye coordination through activities like painting and cutting and pasting, and then more active things. So you can see there, a jump rope. Learning to jump rope, that's a skill that usually 5-year-olds don't have. And learning to do those muscular movements in coordination is really, really helpful. Pick up sticks is another, it's for fine motor skills. Throwing and catching balls, beanbag toss. This helps hand-eye coordination. Puzzles are good for teaching visual skills. Building toys are excellent for the same thing and for creativity. Classic stories, ABC, games, and books, these are things that build cultural literacy and prepare kids for when they're going to start to read. Books about numbers and games, all kinds of art and craft materials. So those are examples for kindergarten, for things that are very developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old. Now I'll show some ideas of using games to teach reading and spelling. There's actually a number of games that you can use to teach your child to read. You really don't have to have a difficult, expensive program, because there are very creative teachers out there who have taken all the elements and put them into games. The phonics and spelling rules are taught by the Phonogram Fun Packet. There are many games in that packet, and they will teach your child to sound out words and then all the spelling rules. And this is a game that can be used for many years because you can use the game board for different skills. This Match and Spell from Orchard is a beginning sounding out phonics game. And then the card games down at the bottom of the screen were developed by a teacher, and every step in learning to read, she has a card game for. So there are actually 12 card games if you get the whole set, but probably even just these 3 will get your child reading, and then you'll be off to simple books. So that's an example of how to teach reading and spelling in the beginning with games. Now I'd like to show you an example of how to teach 3rd grade level arithmetic. You'll see there are a number of games here. The Quick Picks little card games are for addition, subtraction, time, measurement, and money. Now those are recall and recognition games. So that's level 2 and level 3. They're not introductory games for adding, but it's 3rd grade. So this is to build up speed in calculation and fluency. The Math Maze is a similar game that helps you to think through a calculation. Should I add? Should I subtract? Should I multiply to get the answer that I need to get to win? And then you've seen the Wonder Number game before. For fractions, there are numerous games, but I put up one. Fruit Salad is an introductory fraction game. It's very fun, little simple game that young children from about 4 up can learn to play that give them fluency with beginning fractions. Now here are some examples for 3rd grade U.S. geography. At the top I put states and capitals songs. So that's not a game, but it does come with a giant map that can be colored. And it, honestly, you play and sing these songs and your child will know the United States geography down cold, border to border, and then the interior. Scrambled States of America is a game. It's a game for beginners too, and it's very much fun. It is hands down the most fun geography game I have ever seen. And when we have our game days, it's the game children go for first. Then puzzles. I want to point out that puzzles are an excellent way to learn and very good for visual skills. And then States and Capital Sequence is another game to develop more fluency with connecting the states and the capitals. This is an example for language arts in grade 5. Now, you can develop interest in reading about ancient myths and legends with this Professor Noggin's Creatures of Myth and Legend game. It's one of those 2-level games that has simple questions for young kids and harder questions for teens and adults. Penmanship can be a lot more fun put to music. So this is a company that has created handwriting exercises to music. Some people avoid penmanship because it seems very tedious, but it can become almost game-like if you use music or something else to make it fun. You can do vocabulary. The More Roots game teaches Greek and Latin roots, which massively increases vocabulary. There are spelling games like this little kerfuddle game, which is a dice game with letters and you're spelling words. There are lots and lots of writing games, and this is one. This is just a simple little twistable tube. You twist the little sections and then you read off a sentence, and it's usually something with kind of a mystery, something, what's going to happen next, and it's kind of a story starter. For grammar, Mad Libs is a really excellent way to reinforce parts of speech, and it's fun. You can teach your children's parts of speech using Mad Libs for in the beginning. Now we've skipped up to an example for 8th grade, early American history and Constitution. So you can learn the Constitution cold with that game in the middle, the Constitution game. The other games will also fill in all kinds of U.S. history through games. Yes, it's bits and pieces, but it reinforces what they're reading and makes them be able to remember parts of American history much more easily. I want you to understand, if you go to gamecurriculum.com, you're not at 8th grade, you're not only going to see 4 games. There are much more choices, but I could only fit so many on a screen here. You need to pick the games that are going to work best with your child's age and learning style. Feel free to get ideas here and then use that to choose your games. These are more examples, ways you can learn history with games. There are games for every area of history. Here I've shown a game for ancient civilizations. That's a Professor Noggins game. The Explorers game is more Renaissance, and it highlights 13 different explorers. So you can play any card game, any of your favorite card games, and when children are waiting their turn, they can read a little something about one of 13 different explorers. The medieval history game is a Go Fish game. Anybody who can read, probably 3rd grade and up, can play this game. It's very fun. You don't have to know any history, but you will learn a lot playing it. And then I gave an example of a timeline game. There are a number of these timeline games, but they help you lay out in your mind the timeline for different events and important personages in history. Now, finally, here, this is an example of games that can reinforce high school biology. You don't have to wait till high school. A lot of these games can easily be played by younger children, but they're a reinforcement. They aren't a complete biology course, but you can see that there are many games that will teach all about different areas of biology in a fun way that helps it stick in the brain. Now, economics is required in high school, and it can be a kind of dry subject, but not if you play some of the games we have run across. So life on the farm, there you own a dairy farm. As you're going through life on the farm, you have to deal with all the economic issues that a dairy farmer is going to run into. The construction game is based on the concept of monopoly, but in this case, each player owns a construction firm. It's kind of like Monopoly in the time frame it takes to play, but wow, do you learn the economics of running a business. And then Key to the Front Door is another game that teaches you the economics that you will need to know in life. Here are some examples of games for algebra. They're not the only ones, but these all come from the same company. So I thought I would show them to you because they're not really well known. Prime Pack is fabulous. It can be actually, the cards can be used down as low as 2nd or 3rd grade to teach basic multiplication, but it's designed by an algebra teacher to teach factoring. And there are 4 different games, so you needn't get bored with the game you're playing. Very, very different games. The conceptual bingos, there's one that teaches algebra here, rational numbers in algebra, polynomials, and there's one for square roots and quadratic equations. The questions on the calling cards on these bingos range from very, very simple, in other words, just an introduction to this subject, to fairly difficult. So this is a game that can grow as your child becomes more proficient in this mathematical arena. So those are some examples from the game curriculum. You can get the whole thing by going to gamecurriculum.com. I hope this has been helpful to you and you've enjoyed this presentation. Please visit us at gamecurriculum.com.